All right, today we've got a story for you that sounds like it's straight out of a detective novel. We're calling it The Case of the Lost Letter. And it's a fantastic little story from the world of contract law that actually gets to the heart of a question we all deal with pretty much every day. You know that feeling? You hit send on a really important email, maybe accepting a job offer, or you text someone to say, I'll take it for something you're buying online, and for a split second you wonder, okay, at what exact moment did that become a real, legally binding deal? Was it when my finger hit the button, or is it when the other person actually sees it? Well, it's a great question, and believe me, the law has been trying to figure that one out for a very, very long time. So to deal with this whole problem of making deals when you're not in the same room, the courts, way back in the day, came up with a pretty clever old-school solution for the age of snail mail. It's something called the postal rule. And the rule itself is actually super straightforward. It says that a contract is officially formed the second you drop that acceptance letter into the mailbox. That's it. It doesn't matter if it takes a week to get there or even if it gets lost and never arrives. The whole point was to give certainty to the person accepting the offer. You know, once you've sent it, you can relax. It's a done deal.
Okay, so we've got this nice, simple rule. But what happens when that rule gets thrown into a real-world, high-stakes mess? Well, that's exactly what happened in this fascinating case, Holwell Securities versus Hughes. And this case was going to put that classic rule to the ultimate test. And when I say high stakes, I mean it. This wasn't some minor disagreement. Holwell Securities had what's called an option to buy a very valuable property from a Dr. Hughes. The catch was this option had a super strict deadline. Everything, and I mean everything, depended on them communicating their acceptance in time. We're talking about a huge amount of money riding on a single piece of paper. And this is where our mystery really begins. The whole thing blows up because of one simple but totally dramatic event. The letter went missing. It just vanished. And this is where that neat, tidy postal rule slams right into the messy, unpredictable reality of, well, real life. So let's just walk through the sequence of events. First, Holwell Securities gets the option to buy the property. Check. Next, they do exactly what they're supposed to do. They write up their acceptance, and they pop the letter in the mail with plenty of time to spare before the deadline. Then the deadline comes and goes. And here's the kicker. That letter never, ever arrived. It was lost somewhere in the post, and Dr. Hughes never saw it. So here it is, the million-dollar question. Based on that postal rule we just talked about, this should be a done deal, right? The acceptance happened the moment the letter was posted. So there's a valid contract, end of story. At least that's what you think. But as you can probably guess, it wasn't nearly that simple. So how on earth did the court figure this one out? Well, the judges didn't just blindly apply the old rule. Instead, they did what great legal minds do. They put on their detective hats. They went back to the original document, the contract itself, and started looking for clues. And they found a huge one, hidden in a single, powerful phrase. And this, to me, is the absolute best part of the whole story. The fate of this massive property deal didn't come down to centuries of legal history or some complicated rule. Nope. It all hinged on just 5 little words buried deep in the fine print of the original agreement. It's just a perfect example of why you should always, always read the fine print. And here they are, the 5 words that flipped the entire case on its head: by notice in writing. See, the contract didn't just say Holwell had to accept. It said they had to accept by notice in writing. It seems like such a tiny detail, but that little phrase changed everything. So what's the big deal with the word notice? Well, the court basically said, hey, just think about it for a second. The whole point of giving notice is to make something known to someone. You can't actually give someone notice of something if they never receive the message. It's just common sense, right? A lost letter doesn't notify anyone of anything. And just like that, this case created a huge exception to the old postal rule. So the general rule is still out there. Acceptance is effective when you post it. But, and this is a big but, the Holwell exception says that if the contract specifically uses a word like notice, then acceptance only counts when it is actually received. The specific words of the deal trumped the general rule of law. So you might be thinking, okay, interesting story about a lost letter from the 70s. But why should I care? Well, we still talk about this case because its legacy is about so much more than just snail mail. It's about a fundamental principle of any agreement, the absolute importance of being clear. So let's just recap the big lessons here. First, that old postal rule, it's not invincible. It can be pushed aside. Second, and this is the most important one,
The specific words you choose to put in a contract have incredible power. Third, if you ever see the word notice, that's a huge signal that the other person actually has to get the message. And really, it all boils down to one simple idea. Clarity is king. Being precise can save you a world of trouble down the line.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating puzzle for today. This whole case was about a lost letter, right? But think about our world of instant everything. Is an email considered notice the second it lands on a server, even if it's in a spam folder? What about a text message that shows as delivered but not read? Do those little blue check marks on a messaging app count as legal notice? The case of the lost letter might be solved, but it's opened up a whole new set of mysteries for our digital age. What do you think counts as notice today?